They're one Delta One here. So we have been away for a little bit, and I have a reason for that. It's mostly because how do I say this? I've been trying to help a friend out with a Chrysler 200 2.4 liter. If it wasn't a 2.4 liter and it was a 3.5 or 3.6, I believe, V6. Sorry about the shaking. We're on that kind of a road today. If it was a V6 in general, I wouldn't have helped them. But since it was a 2.4, I decided, you know, I love this person. They're sitting in the right lane for straight or left turn only in the straight lane. I don't know what the hell. I'll show you what I mean. Hold on. This is what I mean. This is the left turn lane. Left turn lane. This is straight and right turn only. They're not even in the right lane. And because of that, I'm stuck behind them. Now, I could be a jackass and I could have just got in the left lane and made a left turn, but I don't have to go that way for anything. If I had to go that way for something, I'd have just done it. Just be a dick. But, sorry for the language, I'm just really tired. But anyway, I was helping him for the last, I don't know, week, 2 weeks. I've been helping him with his car. No, it's been a month. No, it hasn't been a month. It's been 3 to 4 weeks. And this is what's happened. He was driving the car. Now, on the 2.4 liter, you have this really weird thermostat on the side of the block. And you also have a really weird place to put your coolant, which is a little radiator cap, but it's in line with the radiator and the fancy little housing. Well, here's the deal. The car got hot. I'm guessing the thermostat failed. The car got hot. That became brittle, and he had to replace that. So he replaced that valve, or that little housing that the cap fits on. All right, but he drove the car. He had a number 2 cylinder something, a number 2 cylinder misfire. All right, so I swapped the coils on it. That went away. And when that went away, he drove it. On the same day I switched the coils on him for him, it switched and the car just died on him. He said the car just died. I told him, no, that had nothing to do with switching the coils. That's not going to happen. Either the misfire will change to another cylinder, or you're going to end up with another misfire, or everything's going to be fine. You're not going to just, the engine's not just going to stop. But so here's the thing. On an inline 4 engine, you losing a cylinder could mean the difference between the car not running and running, depending on the compression ratio of the engine. So what ended up happening was I ended up which way are you going? I'm entirely confused. Okay, you're going right. The officer didn't put his signal on, so I didn't know which way he was going. What ended up happening was the car overheated. Now, here's what happened. The guy told him the car was overheating, so they decided to take the thermostat out of the housing. Now, this is after the car died. They decided to take the thermostat out of one of the thermostats out of the housing. They didn't know that car came with 2 thermostats. The main thermostat they did not take out. They left the thermostat in for the main and only took out the bypass radiator's thermostat. Okay, so they started it, would not run. It would only run when the throttle was pushed, and it would redline because they changed the they pulled one of them and not the other, so it went in a safe mode and it went in a limp mode, which is one of the things that it says in the manual it will do if you do that. So I ended up going and I get the car, I take it there. Well, I bring it to his house. All right. I told him let me start it and see what it looks like. I go to start it. You had, like you said, you have to hold your foot down, not all the way in because that'll put in flood mode, but put the foot down, start it, and it starts, it runs rough. You rev it, it redlines at 2,500 RPM. I said, hold on, wait a minute. That's not limp mode. That's not limp mode. Okay, I thought it was going to limp mode because I figured it was throwing codes while it was doing it. It wasn't throwing a code while it did it. It just went into limp mode. I mean, it just was redlining. And the first thing I thought was, okay, you have an issue with timing right now because it should still redline. Pull out my code reader, put on my Autel, hook up. Autel says the exhaust cam is not in sync. Like it lost sync with exhaust cam, which I figured as much because if it doesn't have both cams being seen, it will redline because it doesn't know who's open and what's not. One cam phase is trying to do this, the other cam phase is trying to do that. So basically one cam phase is trying to revert to stop, the other cam phase is trying to do what the computer's commanding it to do. Well, what ended up happening was I told them, okay, while it was running, I noticed that when you rev it while it was redlining, it was throwing foam out of the actual radiator cap. I said, that's exhaust. You have a warped head. The guy said, well, it's probably just a head gasket. I said, no. Usually when you blow a head gasket, now that can happen just with the head gasket, but usually when you have a leaking head gasket, it usually leaks into the water gasket, and usually it's on the intake side. Usually. It rarely happens on the exhaust side. It can, but it usually happens on the intake side because, you know, a cooler intake, hotter exhaust, it cracks on that area. So I pulled the valve cover. Very first thing I noticed, oh my God, the amount of oil sludge in this thing. I mean, I could use this Play-Doh. That clearly was what was causing his cam phasers to be out of sync. On top of the crankshaft sensor. I'll explain that in a second. So I go to start pulling the head bolts. Well, at this point, obviously, I've got the engine motor mount off. I pulled the cage. I pulled the tensioner. I pulled the chain. I'm now pulling the cam. I've already loosened the bolts for the phasers. What I'm trying to do now is I'm trying to pull the head off. So I start pulling the cam caps off in sync, in order. Now, halfway through the intake, I realized I'm not reusing this head or the camshaft. So I just started taking them off. Now, I did in the beginning sequence start taking them off, you know, evenly. But once I got like a few turns off of it, I just went to taking them off. And when I got to the back of it, the cam went like that. Now, I figured, okay, I just broke the cam. Oh, well, the new head comes with one. So I go to take the other cam out, and then I notice I can't pull this cam out. I should be able to pull this cam out because I just broke the one on the other side. Can't pull it out. Well, after further looking at this cam didn't break in an upward motion. This cam broke in a twisting motion. So we get this cam cap off to pull the other side of the cam off. The cam cap has been welded to the cam. And on other places, it's missing cam material off the cam shaft itself, and it's in the head. And on the front of it, it has spun the bearing on the cam cap, which I didn't know you could do that on a cam, but spun the bearing on the cam cap for the front of the cam because it's not it's a sleeved bearing. So it sits on top of it, and there's one on top of it, and it spun that one so far around that the bottom one had literally been pushed out, and the top one had been pushed around and was literally being melted into. So I pulled that off. So, okay, you broke your cam. All right, so clearly we got to go further than that because, yes, the cam being broken did stop it from being in time, which, yeah, but that's not going to stop it from being able to, you know, throw coolant into, exhaust fluid into the coolant. That's not going to happen because you broke a cam cap. Broke a cam. So we go down, we go to pulling off the head, pull the head off. All right, top dead center on a cylinder 4 engine, usually cylinder 1 and 4 on the same stroke and cylinder 2 and 3 on the same stroke. So on top dead center, cylinders 1 and 4 are at, you know, at full stroke. And the second and third were all the way down. Now, while the head was off and I had him cleaning the head and I had him cleaning the gasket material, I looked at it and told him, I said, the wall on cylinder 2 looks scored. Now, this is normal to see scoring, but it was the only one I saw that had scoring. So, you know, I didn't think anything of it because, you know, it's quite normal to see scoring, especially after the engine overheated. Now, after I pulled this out, and then I went to researching while it was cleaning, I found out that the cylinder head thermostat that they left in was a 175, and if it was stuck, it did not open. The cylinder head, the one they pulled out, was a 250. So if it was going up to 250 and it was not meant to be that high, they've already cooked that. Now, I did do, after I put the new head on and it started, it ran, and while it started and while it ran, it would run fine at high idle, because when you start it ran at high idle. It would start at high idle, it would run good, it would come down, it would be okay, and then when it would sit there and idle, it would want to die. But it would never die, it would just sit there like it wanted to die. Well, the issue that I found out was that, you know, let me do a compression test. All right, I did a compression test on an engine, a head I just put on. I had 150 on all head locations except cylinder 2. Cylinder 2 only had like 15 pounds of pressure. I was like, don't tell me I put a bad head on this car. Well, while it was running, I can't remember the reason. No. What I ended up finding was there was an intake manifold leak that I took the car back apart, not completely, just to pull the intake manifold back off. Found the leak, put the gasket back in place. When I did that, I realized while I was doing it, I realized that there was oil on the brand new filter that just got put in literally moments before I started the car. Now, the oil was located around the PCV system. I noticed this oil on the old filter. Here's what I think. I think this issue was around a lot longer before then, for it to be throwing oil into the filter like that. And then what ended up happening was it finally just went too far and it blew. Because if it's putting the exhaust, no, what ended up happening was when I saw that, I decided while the car was running to pull the PVC valve. No, I didn't. I was trying to put oil in it. I was adding oil to it, and I looked and saw that it had the PVC system had smoke coming out of it when I would do that. So when I did that, I pulled the PVC valve, and it's just sitting there puffing smoke out of it. It's like, okay, you broke a ringland. You either broke a ringland or you killed the I don't know if on that engine it's sleeved or if it's machined. But either he's damaged the cylinder wall or he's damaged the ringland. And specifically the compression rings on the head, on the cylinder. And my trip to Korea is this week on this Friday, so I will not have no matter what I order, if I decide to just pull it all back apart, pull the one cylinder and do that one particular ring, or if I decide to pull all four of them and do all four of them, it doesn't matter what I order. If I order just the piston and rings and do the one cylinder, or it's only got 70,000 miles on this motor. Or if I decide to pull all four cylinders and replace all four rings, it doesn't matter. The parts would come in after I leave. So I told him he's got two options. He could either have someone pull the head, pull the valves. Pull the heads, pull the valves, and they can test them. I'm almost certain that it's not the head, being that it's coming through the crankcase. So I ended up telling him, well, you know, you either had bad rings or you have a bad sleeve, or you have a bad cylinder wall, one of the two. So the cheapest way around this whole deal, there's really no cheap way when you got to do this. The cheapest way to do it, if he's going to do it himself, would be to pay $30 and get the new rings, pull it all back apart, pay the $60 for the gaskets, push that piston back up, replace the rings on it, inspect the rings on it, put it back down. I don't suspect the other rings are bad. They're putting 150 PSI on all three. And I replaced the rings on it, put it back in, and when you get it back in, put the head back on it, do a compression test on it. You can do that without the valves. Well, yeah, wait. Yeah, it's an overhead cam, so you can do that without the cams on it. You can put it and spin it, but you'd lose top dead center, and you'd have to find top dead center again. But you would know if it was holding pressure or not. I wouldn't recommend doing that because you have both intake and exhaust valves closed. So I wouldn't recommend doing that. I'd recommend getting it back in time first and then doing it. And then checking for compression, at least any kind of compression more than what he had. And in that case, it'll work out. If it doesn't work out, that means he's focused. If it doesn't work out, that means he's broke the cylinder wall, which I doubt it being that, because the way the head is made on the 2.4 liter is it's one of those jacket type cylinders. So if it broke the cylinder wall or cracked it, it probably would be drinking coolant consistently. Or it would be putting foam into it. There was no foam going into the coolant. The coolant was not dropping. It wasn't bubbling. It wasn't foaming. It wasn't doing anything. So he may be able to get away with doing one sleeve, but again, you still have to do the entire head job all over again. On that car, the head bolts can be reused. I would not recommend reusing the head gasket, I told him. But the head bolts can be reused. All he has to do is pull that. He's got to drain the coolant again. He's got to drain the oil again. He's got to pull all the bolts out of the timing cover again. He's got to pull all that gasket material off. He's got to clean it again. He's got to get new gasket material. I mean, not gasket material, new caulking for the mega gasket. And pull the oil pan. So I'll let you guys know what his choice is with that, because I really don't want to. I refuse to really start a project that I'm not going to finish, and I do mostly refuse to finish a job that someone else has started. The only time I will is if all the bolts and stuff are already there. And good news, everyone. Sorry. The title came in for that. So I'll be able to register that. I'm probably going to try to register that today. And the Copart, the way it works in Mississippi for the salvage cars, this car is not salvaged. It's got a really interesting history. And I'll wait till the next upload to explain the history of this car on why it has to be done this way. This car is a clean title car from the auction, but it's got a weird history, which is why it has to be done weird. Because here in Mississippi, you have to register it under your own name before you can actually put it in someone else's name, like a salvage vehicle. But, you know, for here, salvage is done that way. But this car isn't salvage, so I'll have to explain the history behind this vehicle to understand this. I'm going to go inside and go to sleep. I'm quite tired. Peace.